Hi guys, what the Tories like to do when their policies come crashing down due to the fact that they either can't operate inside reality or are potentially illegal is to blame the civil service, or as Jacob Rees-Mogg likes to call them, the blob. I've said before that while Suella Braverman or Priti Patel could have talked about pushing back boats by using the Royal Navy, members of the armed forces didn't want to be the ones facing a judge or an inquiry later on. The same goes for the civil service. While the minister can talk tough, it will be the people working on the ground who will face the music, not the MP. So when it comes to weapons sales to Israel, which are potentially illegal under international law, the civil service is not going to be the Tories' whipping boy.
Well, we've been passed a series of quite extraordinary emails from members of the PCS union in largely the business and trade department. And essentially at the heart of this is their concern that some of their members are working on the kinds of arms export licenses and other things, arms, of course, going to Israel, that are at the heart of the debates around legality and illegality. And they're very concerned that they could be caught up in those legal proceedings and legal arguments. And if it is the case, for example, that the government's legal advice is now suggesting that Israel is in breach of international humanitarian law, that those civil servants could actually become liable themselves for breaches of international humanitarian law for continuing to supply arms to Israel. And their members are very conscious of something called the Rome Statute. That's the founding document of the International Criminal Court. And one of the things that it makes clear is that simply following the orders of your superiors is not in itself an excuse for committing breaches of international law. So they've written to their superiors asking for clarity, asking for some sense of what this legal advice says, and we've got emails suggesting that they have been told that they cannot see the legal advice and simply been asked to accept assurances that it is, and I quote, very unlikely that any civil servants would find themselves caught up in legal proceedings. And
just think about that for a moment, okay? The civil service have asked the government to see the legal advice, and the government have refused to publish the legal advice, have refused to give this information over to the civil service, and have told them, don't worry, it will be okay. You'll be probably fine. It's like, you know, you want the civil service to believe the Conservative Party. You want the civil service to believe the likes of Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, people like that. Because of course they don't believe them. They want a guarantee that they will be okay. And this makes sense because, as I said before, when the music has to be faced, it will be the civil service. And they won't be able to go on the excuse, well, Boris Johnson told me I'll be okay. Or Rishi Sunak told me I'll be okay. Or whoever told me I'd be okay. This is what I've said before. When Boris Johnson was in charge and he was telling, businesses in Northern Ireland, don't worry, there won't be any checks. If Boris Johnson is telling you something, it has to be the opposite. And when it comes to the civil service, they are the ones who will be facing a tribunal. They will be the ones who could be on trial. And they can't use the excuse, well, the government told me I'd be okay. The government suggested it's probably okay. No, they'd have to have some evidence. They'd have to see the legal advice. And the government don't want to publish this legal advice, which is extremely concerning and probably points in the direction that, yes, it is illegal, that Israel is breaching international humanitarian law, and you need to end arms sales. Now, when it comes to arms sales themselves, we're not talking about a significant amount of money changing hands, but there is an issue here. The arms are not going directly, it seems, to Israel. They're going to the US because the UK is supplying parts, not complete products. So it's more complicated than just stopping arms sales to Israel. You'd be stopping arms sales to the United States because, as I said, a lot of these parts are going to the US and then they're going to Israel. It would make more sense to impose sanctions if this is what you want to do, to impose sanctions on imports, because that's something you do control. But I don't know if that's going to actually happen. But back to the main point here. The Tory government are asking civil servants, please believe us, even though we're not actually going to trust you with the legal advice. Would you trust them? I certainly would not. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.